This is Sports Talk with Steve Jones, a Seven Mountains Media production, your daily talk show with the voice of Penn State football and men's basketball, featuring interviews with special guests. Now here's your host, back from vacation, Mr. Steve Jones.
Yes, despite all the story time with Steve's, those were recorded ahead of time.
Those were done. You were on vacation. You came back. You flew the plane back from wherever you were, came in, recorded them for a few minutes, and flew home.
Right. So I'll give you a story time with Steve about flying the plane.
Oh, boy.
No, it has nothing to do with flying a plane, but it was an expression I used. We are getting ready for Delaware State. It was December 29th. And we had done the Quinnipiac game on the 22nd, and the Jordan Center kept flipping over. On the graphic, Dick Girardi and I are doing the postgame show. Next game, Delaware State, December 29th, 2 o'clock tip-off. Then the graphic would flip. Next game, Delaware State, December 29th, 7:30 tip-off. So we're in the commercial break. I looked over at Dick. I said, check the scoreboard out. And he goes, oh, jeez. Well, we knew, and Dick said, which one? He said, let's make sure which one it is. I said, Dick, I know it's 2 o'clock. I said, I do know that. He goes, okay, good. So next week, 29th shows up. All right, 2 o'clock. We're on the air at 1:30. All right. So Dick and I get there around 1:45, 1 o'clock. And Dick says, hey, Horace Owens is one of the assistant coaches for Delaware State. And he had played at the University of Rhode Island. I'd broadcast his games when he was at URI. So Dick and I know him. So I said, hey, let's go. Hey, so we're on the floor. We're just chatting, shooting the breeze. You know. And all of a sudden, Chelsea Viauer, who is the outstanding sports information person for basketball, calls. And she didn't call me. I'm like, I looked at my phone and went, wonder what Chelsea wants. One, maybe there's a lineup change or something like that. I answer the phone. She says, Steve, who's engineering your game today? And I said, Bob Taylor. Says, well, he's not here. I said, yeah, well, I said, Bob could be out getting something to eat. She said, no, like none of the equipment is set up. And what? I said, okay. So I start doing the sprint up the stairs because I do know the equipment is in the closet up there. So I know the equipment is here. And I call Bob and I said, hey, Bob, where are you right now? He goes, well, I'm down here in Altoona. I said, well, Bob, we're on the air in 20 minutes. What? The game's at 7:30 tonight.
Oh, no.
All right. I said, well, no. I said, it's actually 2 o'clock. He goes, oh, no. I said, Bob, I said, the equipment's here. I said, but I'm going to need you to kind of take me through this as to what to do. I said, no, certain parts are easy. Here's the board, put the board down, plug the board in, electricity. I got it. Plug in headsets, got it. But then there are other connections you have to make. How do you connect into the network? And there's a couple of other things you have to do that are more complicated. I finally paused at one point as I'm scrambling and putting all this together. There are wires all over the floor because they have a lot of backup stuff that you don't use. And I said, Bob, this is the equivalent of the air traffic controller telling the passenger how to land the plane. Bob's going down is moving his way up 99, about 99 miles an hour. Okay, trying to get there. I did enough to get us on the air at 1:28, so 2 minutes before the airtime. And Dick Girardi's off the side. He goes, I can't help you. I said, believe me, I'm hanging on by my fingernails here. So we're able to do the pregame show. And Bob showed up at the under 16 timeout. But I couldn't set it up where we were sitting at our normal spot. We had to stand up where Bob is because it just didn't have time. And okay, let's be honest about it. I also didn't know how to hook the deal up to get it down to the bottom anyway. We got on the air.
You got on the air, and that's what matters.
And I got a note from one of the executives at Learfield and said, don't let them give you any garbage. You did a great job getting So I was doing the credit to the end. Great job by Kyle Leffer in Jefferson City and Dick Girardi here. I'm Steve Jones. Oh, yeah, Bob. Oh, yeah. Hey, Bob, what'd you do today? No, Bob knew I was kidding around with him. You can't take that stuff seriously.
We love Bob.
Bob's awesome. That's why we all think the world of Bob. That's why he does one thing and it wasn't his fault. 7:30, 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 7:30. Oh, my God. Oh, this isn't a good thing. All right. I told Bob, I said, hey, on the way home, by the way, I said the speed limit is not 99. That's the route number. All right. So let's transition out of that. So everybody thinks like, oh, that's it. We're done for the day.
Yeah, we're done for the day. Story time with Steve. 7 minutes. We're out of here.
No, we're not out of here.
We're not out of here.
Right? Although the Rose Bowl, I said, Bob, you gonna do the whole game? Again, if you can't laugh about this stuff, I mean, do you think for 1 second I was upset with him?
No, not at all.
I'm talking zero, like zero, right? It's just like, how can we get this done? Hey, just get here as fast as you can. Everything's fine. Because getting upset, what does that do? What does that do? It does zero, right? And this is a person I personally like a lot, respect a lot. What? I'm going to sit there and go, all right, just settle down. Things happen. It's all right. Okay? Things happen. This is one of those things that happen. How do you then correct it? Well, you don't correct it by wasting time by getting mad.
Mm-mm.
All right? And I was never mad the entire time anyway. I was just like, okay, how do we do this? Like, hey, Bob, I've got this extra cord here. Where does this go? All right, so we are in a period of time where Major League Baseball should be dominating. Yet today is the first day of SEC Media Days taking place in Nashville. They've moved it from Hoover, Alabama to Nashville. Georgia will be the primary story tonight, I believe, at 7 o'clock this evening will be their media time to discuss everything. Texas and Oklahoma not participating. They participated in Big 12 Media Days last week because they're still in that conference. Then next week will be the Big 10. And this is it's all just the talking season right now. How do you rank the quarterbacks in the conference? What do you think about this? Nobody knows.
How's he looking in camp, Steve? How's he looking in camp so far?
Right, exactly. And camp hasn't even opened yet.
But how's he looking? We have to know already.
Yeah, so far great, yeah. But it's at least a way to publicize that college football is around the corner. Georgia, of course, will be a primary story. Alabama is going to be a primary story, only because Alabama has this year, for the first time in a long time, they don't have that go-to guy at quarterback that can make things go, because the number of times last year that Bryce Young bailed them out, Texas being a primary one, it kind of makes you sit back and say, okay, let's see what's going on here. I mean, this is a team that also had Will Anderson on it last year. So, Tommy Rees now is the offensive coordinator. Yeah, the kid that played quarterback for him at Notre Dame last year is going to be in the mix here because of the other two quarterbacks that competed in the spring, Milroe and the other kid, whose name I can't remember, didn't exactly have everybody go, hey, we're all set. They kind of looked around and said, all right, what's out there? All right. Georgia has a new quarterback. The Beck kid now has to come in, talented, but you're talented until it's like the old, Mike Tyson, whatever you want to say about him, he said, everybody's got a plan until you get hit. Okay, well, guess what? They're going to be coming at him 1,000 miles an hour. Texas is going to have its return game at Alabama this year after that terrific game that was played last year where Young bailed them out. LSU, Jaden Daniels, fine. Tennessee, Hendon Hooker's moved on. Joe Milton. A lot of people, they love Joe Milton. And
not high on him?
No. But I may be jaded by the fact that the one game I did with him at quarterback at Michigan, I didn't like anything I saw on tape. And then when I watched him in practical application, there was nothing that impressed me. Nothing. The one game he had earlier that year to open the season with Minnesota, he played very well, but that was the only time. Now, he's surrounded by more talent offensively at Tennessee. That'll make a difference. He's older. That'll make a difference, but we'll see. I mean, whenever people want you to sit there and predict how a team is going to do, most of it is based on, hey, look, I think Georgia has a chance to, people will tell you they think Georgia has a chance to win every game again this year. Okay. Why? Well, they're loaded with talent. But even last year, out of nowhere, they played a game at Missouri, and they had to fight their guts out to win the game on the road. When Penn State won the national championship in 1986, this is a team that in 1986 beat Miami, beat Notre Dame, beat Pitt. They won all these games against Big Net and won at Alabama. Alabama was undefeated, ranked number 2, won the game. Okay, won at Notre Dame. Right? Yet what was the game where Penn State had to fight its guts out to win? Cincinnati. They had to block a punt. Shane Conlon made a big play. Now at the end, they put together a drive and finally escaped and won the game 23-17 after losing most of the game. You have games like that. And that was the game that Georgia had when they played against Missouri. And that was on the road at Faurot Field. So that's what makes this so unpredictable. In college, the turnover in personnel between graduation, the draft, transfers is more dramatic than ever, which makes every team more difficult to read. And I think that's where the mystery comes in. I think the assumptions that you could make about teams in the 60s, 70s, and 80s are not the same assumptions you can make now. You can't, because the turnover is greater. It used to be in the 80s, after the 60s and 70s, where it was, okay, we got these guys back, these guys are gone, they're back, gone. Nobody transfers, nobody, right? But then in the 80s, the dynamic of getting a fifth year of eligibility and redshirting became popular. So now who's going to come back, who's going to go to the draft, that was it. But not to this extent. Not to this extent. As somebody who in April and May worked on all of the chart work so I could start the season at a zero spot, the amount of research that you have to do on teams now because of the change in personnel, and not just who transfers in, but who's out. It takes a lot more time to do it because the personnel is completely different. And you just, and it's across the board. For example, let's take Northwestern. They're in a 30-day period right now where everybody is allowed to transfer. Now, this is going to be difficult. And the reason is everybody's at 85. Everybody settled their roster. Now, maybe somebody has 83, 84. Maybe. But this isn't like what happened with Penn State in 2012 because there were a lot of disgusting things that happened in terms of fines and transfers and people all over campus. It's like a meat market here. It's unbelievable. Guys finally hid out in the weight room because it was the one place they felt they wouldn't be hassled, going to class, going to the dorm, things like that. Well, you were allowed to transfer to another school, and it didn't count against the 85. So say you took, just say, three players, right? You could play the season at 88. You're allowed to. This is different. It's 85. Well, almost everybody's at their 85. And there's some people that got to their 85 by looking at a couple of very deserving walk-ons and saying, hey, how about a scholarship? So I don't see much movement there with that. It is amazing that the report comes out, and I didn't even know they were doing a report. But I guess it was a 6-month investigation. Now, who they talked to, I don't know. But I guess when you read the summary of it, I haven't read the report, just the summary. We're going to take the Jeremy Schaap way of doing things. I'm just going to read the summary. Okay. And then I'm going to act like I know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Jeremy, get you. That's a great job that day. But the summary says that the coaching staff didn't know about it. Okay. Well, then who knew about it? The players. Which players have been suspended? None. But the head coach lost his job. Now, part of, again, he's the leader. He's the focal point. He's the, everybody knows. This is where, for him, he had a great relationship with the university president. Well, the university president changed over, and this president's only been on the job for 1-2 months, something like that. So that individual doesn't know him at all. So we'll see what he wants to do here. We already know he's hired an attorney because the key is fired with cause means they don't have to pay the buyout.
Yeah, and that'd be a sizable one for him, I believe, for Pat Fitzgerald.
It's huge.
Yeah.
So that's why he's picked up an attorney, because he's going to say, hey, look, I think the argument's going to be, the report says independently that I didn't know anything about this, and so I can't be fired with cause. Now, but after that, I can't begin to tell you in a million years what's going on.
Well, the thing is, we don't know, because part of this is Northwestern's a private school.
Yes.
That I think a lot of people have forgotten that part. Because if this was a public school, they'd have to release the report because of just what the school is. It's a public school. They have to tell us.
Right.
But Northwestern doesn't have to. And that was the thing on the Friday before 4th of July. They just said, oh, we're suspending him for 2 weeks.
Right.
Middle of the summer. Doesn't do a lot for you. But that was their thing. Right. And the report didn't have to get released or put out there or anything. Right. No one really saw it. It also happened when all of the ESPN layoffs were going on. So it kind of fell to the wayside. Pat Fitzgerald got suspended. And then when the player went and talked to the Northwestern students, that was when all of a sudden just boom, explosion happened. And then he said, oh, I made a mistake and didn't do enough to Pat Fitzgerald, and then fired him almost on the spot.
Right. Well, again, we're doing all this from 30,000 feet.
We don't know. We weren't there. We don't know what happened, happened, hasn't.
Who knows and knew about it and who didn't. Right now, you're just taking everybody's word for what they're saying. The hazing part of it, obviously, fraternities, for example, and I was not a part of a fraternity at Penn State. I never got it to begin with. I never understood what the hazing part was. I never did. And again, as somebody who was not part of the Greek system, all right, I'm just saying I didn't get it. Okay. So I don't understand why a football team feels compelled to do a hazing thing. There are certain things that you do, like the freshmen come in. Hey, the freshmen have to do a skit.
You have to carry the bags.
Right. Or they have to carry bags, or they have to sing their high school fight song or whatever. Well, I'm sorry. That's not hazing. That's just good-natured fun.
Yeah.
Right? But it's the other stuff, which I think everybody has a pretty good idea what hazing is. Why feel compelled to do that? I don't get it. Right? Because
there's no need. There's no reason for it.
What does it make your team or your locker room better? It doesn't, except the person being hazed. Right?
And to them, it instills fear. If anything.
And they feel like garbage. Right? Hey, great. That's a way great, to grow camaraderie in the workplace, in the locker room. That part, I've always found that to be personally galling. You got to do once you grow up.
Yeah. And some of the discussions that have come out of this, of the allegations being made and things discussed, are disgusting at the very least.
Sure.
And it's just like, why? There's no need for this to happen. And I wonder if we will ever actually see the report. Because...
I'll give you an example because you talked about being a private school. When Northwestern, when Kane Coulter was there, their quarterback, was it the United Steelworkers? I'm trying to think who it was, but they tried to unionize. And Coulter had done a lot of reading on it, and he says, hey, look, maybe, let's see if we can unionize. Well, the Northwestern players did vote. And the National Labor Relations Board said, and we'll be releasing the results. The National Labor Relations Board never released the results. Now, I can tell you internally what I know, and what I know is the vote was 60-15 against. Now, give or take, it could have been 58-17. It could have been whatever. But in general, I was told by people I trust at Northwestern that the vote was about 4-1 against. It was like 60-15. Okay. All right. But the NLRB never released it. And again, being a private school, when we sit there and we talk about financials from us.gov, okay, so us.gov, it's the Department of Education. Each school has to put their athletic department financials to the Department of Education. So when I sit there and I tell you that, and again, I'm not trying to be a jerk here about the women's basketball thing, please, I'm not. I'm just trying to give facts. When I tell you that in fiscal year ending 2022, women's basketball in the Big Ten, the schools combined lost $46 million, right? That's just me sitting down and adding it up, but who's not in there? Northwestern. Because they're a private school, they don't have to report. And you'll find the same thing when USC gets in, okay? Because USC is a private school, they don't have to report. Mm-hmm. So that $46.3 million is for 13 schools. And then you got Rutgers that plays the game. Like, the numbers were exactly even. It was like, okay, yeah, sure. Okay.
We got all zeros everywhere.
Over here in the back.
We gained $1, Steve. We gained $1.
There you go. It's like, I mean, the men's basketball numbers and the women's basketball numbers are even. Mm-hmm. Like, you go, excuse me? Can I talk to you for a second about that? So you do have to work your way through it. But that's, again, being a private school, they don't have to report it. So you don't know how much money they made on football, whether they broke even on men's basketball, whether they suffered a small loss on women's basketball. Nobody knows because they're a private school. Okay. So, but they'll move forward with David Braun as their defensive coordinator, as the interim head coach. Now, it's going to be important here for me to check on David Braun, because David Braun is right now the interim head football coach at Northwestern. All right? And the reason he is selected is quite simple.
It is very simple, actually.
Because he is the newest member of the staff, right? And I mean newest member of the staff, brought on this spring.
He was brought in January as defensive coordinator from North Dakota State.
North Dakota State, okay? So he is the one that has the least contact with anybody within the program and with the players. So he was selected as the head coach for that reason and that reason only.
It from a PR standpoint, it's the perfect hire, I guess is what you could say. That he had nothing to do with it. He got there in January when they started the investigation, so he knows diddly. Right, is what my mother would say.
When they sit back and say how much do the coaches know, he's the one above all. I go, I don't think he knew anything. Yeah. It's like, okay, all he knows is what's gone on for the last 6 months, and
he's probably trying to find his office. Like that's where he is. Yeah,
and this is a big step up for him because you're talking about Winona State. I mean, he's never been a head coach.
Yeah, he was coordinator of the year at North Dakota State in 2021.
Northern Iowa before that, UC Davis, Winona State, and Culver Stockton, where he was the defensive coordinator and linebacking coach.
Mm-hmm. So he essentially went from North Dakota State defensive coordinator to Northwestern head coach, or interim for now, within the span of technically a few months.
But what's interesting about him is that he's going to have to be the one at Big Ten Media Days next week that gets up and has to answer all these questions. And he's looking around going, I have no idea what's going on.
I feel bad for him and whatever Northwestern players have to be there. I really do.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's going to just be a problem. And I know the Northwestern players released their statement, and that statement had issues in it. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot going on there. And that I don't know if we will ever get the full story, at least in terms of the report, because, again, they don't have to release it. I think it'd be good for them to do it just to be like, read it, like, here, just take it at this point, even though it's a little too late, I think, at this juncture.
Yeah.
Because the accusers have gotten out ahead of it and been like, this is like what happened at Northwestern.
Right.
And so people,
and again, they were 1-11 last year, and that was the one was in Ireland.
Yeah.
And that was one where they were losing, and Scott Frost decided to, hey, this is the time to go for it, and he kicked an onside kick, and Northwestern recovered, turned the game around after being
Scott Frost
down by 11. But that's so the question would be that people would, like a cynic would have, is if they were 11-1 instead of 1-11, what would you do? But reality is they were 1-11, so you move on.
I also, quickly before we move on, I also want to bring up, I feel like I am very happy that I am not, Derek Gregg is their
athletic
AD
director.
I am happy I'm not him, because they also had to fire their baseball coach due to bullying allegations the same exact week they had to fire Pat Fitzgerald.
Yep.
So I feel bad at this point. Like it is just a media firestorm at Northwestern, a school that I know well, many know well. It's a well-known school, and so seeing all this happen is just a lot.
It's a lot to deal with, and they're doing what they can to deal with it. And again, we don't know what happened with Northwestern baseball, and we don't know what happened with Northwestern football, just what's being reported, and then we'll go from there. But next week when they do sit down and meet, Ryan Day is going to get a lot of questions about losing to Michigan 2 years in a row. He'll get a lot of questions about Kyle McCord. Michigan, I would think that Jim Harbaugh would get a lot of questions and will deliver a lot of very confusing answers about the health of his running backs, both Edwards and Corum, the development of J.J. McCarthy, and who will step up at wide receiver for them. James Franklin, I think he'll get a lot of questions about Drew Aller. He may get some questions about, okay, now who fills the leadership vacuum at Penn State, which has been happening. I mean, this is the first opportunity for national media to sit down and talk with him, and regional. And let's see, I would think, and then what does it take to get over the Ohio State-Michigan hump? I think he'll probably get asked about that. Iowa, Kirk Ferentz is going to get asked a lot about what Jack Ham and I refer to as the race to 325. Okay? For Brian Ferentz to keep his job as the offensive coordinator, Iowa has to score 325 points. What is interesting is that the 325 points they're just offensive points. If the defense comes up and runs back 2 fumbles and 2 interceptions for touchdowns, plus the extra points, that's 28 of them right there.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Now
So
you're under 300, baby.
Brian's
Let's go.
Brian's down to 297. Right?
Chip away at it slowly but surely.
Yeah, so here we go. Great. Defense runs an interception back at the end of the game to the 10-yard line. They run the kicker out, gets 3. That's 3 fewer.
3 more.
And they didn't run a single offensive play to do it. So he'll get asked about that. about getting Cade McNamara now as his quarterback and Eric All. What are they going to do at wide receiver, which is a big part. That is an interesting dynamic for them. And losing Jack Campbell is a big dynamic. I mean, Jack went to the NFL.
Yeah.
I mean, at some point, it's time to go on, as Chuck Noll would say, with your life's work. And so he'll get asked about that because Campbell, as well as the Iowa defense played last year, Campbell made up for a multitude of mistakes because his skill level was so high. Outstanding in particular in the pass game. Don't sit down and look at stats. Please, don't do that. All right, don't make that mistake. Well, he only had one interception. How good was he in the pass game? All right. If you understand the depth of a drop that a linebacker has to make, and Campbell's a man of good size as well, you now have to throw that ball over him. And who knows how many interceptions they got on overthrows. I've always, the example I've always pointed out was the Calvin Lowry, who's now in the Penn State staff, interception against Ohio State in 2005, where Troy Smith threw it. He picked it off at about the 30-yard line, ran it back to the 2, and then Michael Robinson went over the left side and scored after that. The reason the play happened was, as Smith went back to pass the own goal line, Paul Posluszny dropped into the zone, and Posluszny was outstanding at playing the pass. Dropped into a zone, he had to throw the ball over Posluszny, and Calvin was playing center field and was able to run it back. Well, a good linebacker does that. That's where Campbell was so good last year, in the last 2 years for Iowa, because with his size and his ability to get into the right spot that he's supposed to be in, give the right depth, you have two options. Do I throw it over him or do we drag somebody underneath him? And so that will be actually a big loss for them to replace. Mike Loxley will get asked a lot about Talia Tagovailoa, getting him back. Tom Allen is going to get a lot of questions about the pressure he's facing at Indiana. Matt Rule about all the turnover and change at Nebraska and whether he can get Nebraska back on track. Tony Petitti, the commissioner of the Big Ten, is going to get asked questions about the media contract, which that media contract, it was made a big deal out of, but that was just tying up loose ends. That wasn't, that's typical. That's why they're called agreements in principle. Hey, you've reached an agreement in principle. We've got the whole thing. After that, you work out a couple little details here and there. And so that's all tied up. That's no big deal. But he'll still get asked about it because what the Big Ten has done with Jim Delaney is, and I'm not completely on board with this, but I'm on board with a lot of it. They weaned themselves off the ESPN deal. And I'll get to that in a second, because the other thing Tony Petitti will discuss will be the integration then of UCLA and USC and where that stands. When you're going to get a full, not just opponents, but a full schedule for 2024. Probably will be asked about where the integration is on other sports and where that stands at this time. And then he'll be asked about the possibility of expansion. All the commissioners will be, Greg Sankey's going to have his press conference today at the SEC. Everybody's asked about expansion and about realignment. So all the commissioners will have to deal with that. The coaches don't have to deal with that. Okay, they just have to deal with, James Franklin has to deal with West Virginia.
He deals with the next opponent in front of him.
Yes,
he
doesn't have to deal with like the big picture of life, of who's in, who's out.
But James, what are your thoughts on women's volleyball and their schedules going forward if this realignment happens? He doesn't get asked that question.
No, nor should he. All right. So those are the questions he'll have to take care of along the way. And realignment is until the Pac-12 settles something one way or the other. Realignment is going to keep coming up. San Diego State, there's a meeting today in the Mountain West Conference that, by the way, doesn't include San Diego State.
San Diego State. Why'd you have to do it?
think they were rolling the dice.
They rolled the dice and rolled snake eyes.
Well, they had asked for the extension. As you and I had talked about, they were not going to get the extension.
Mm-mm.
If it says June 30th, it says June 30th. Okay. Well, on June 30th, they informed them we want to stay. Well, the $6.6 million payout that they were scheduled to get on July 1 was withheld. And the reason it was withheld was that as part of their exit fee. So that's what the meeting is today in the Mountain West about, okay, are they in, out, do we give them the money or not, and how we're going to handle it. That's why San Diego State is not a part of the meeting. So they are not represented at the meeting at all when it comes to their future with the conference. The assumption has been that the Pac-12 would like to, we'll call it the Pac-10, let's be more accurate, moving forward, the possibility of adding San Diego State SMU. That's been talked about. That's not exactly a secret. But they have to get a TV contract first. CW's already booked, so we're done. That deal the ACC had with the CW, by the way, was just all that's WHVL TV here in State College for years carried ACC football and some ACC basketball. For years they did that. They don't do it now. But for years they carried it. I mean, I'm talking up until about 3 years ago they carried it. That's the package that the CW got. Okay.
Yeah. It's not crazy.
Right. No, it's the same. I think it's the same money, whatever. It's not like, oh, okay. It's just that's where they farmed out that to. That's where it goes. But yeah. So those are the things that they're going to have to answer for.
True TV.
True TV is part of Discovery Warner Brothers.
Oh.
Right. Which is Turner, TBS, TNT, True. Okay.
I believe the WNBA just got some an Ion deal. So maybe they go to Ion at this point.
Ion was another one that was rumored about 4 months ago, and it never came to fruition. There have been a lot of rumors about the Pac-10.
They're sitting here waiting for someone to take them out on a very expensive date, and no one's showing up.
No. And the question is, how much is linear and how much is streaming? I mean, that's a big question. I know streaming is the, quote, wave of the future. But in the drive to get to streaming, networks are losing their shirts on this. Paramount's losing like 600 to 800 million. ESPN's losing a little bit less than everybody else, but Disney overall is losing like 500 to 800 million.
Streaming is the big what's going to happen with it.
I mean, I realize the play. I know what the play is. The play is that it's going to become the dominant form of accessing media. That's the play, right? But as much as everyone talks about cutting the cord, it's going slower than people realize.
Yeah.
Right. So now let's get to the new TV contract, which now the Big Ten is into. And the fact, Jim Delaney did an interview with Scott Docterman of The Athletic, where he talked about how they've moved away from ESPN. Now, I would have kept a package, Kyle, some package with them, some limited package somewhere.
Give you some worldwide leader in sports broadcasts.
That way you're still like, since they're giving you some money, they will give you some publicity. It'll be very interesting to see how they handle game day, both football and basketball, as to how they treat Big Ten schools. Oh, they'll get mentioned. But will it be with the same extensive coverage that they're going to give the SEC and others? Okay. And in the interview, Jim Delaney talked about, and this is a well-known story, so everybody knows. I mean, this is not speaking out of turn here. But ESPN always tried to lowball like everybody. So it's not that just the Big Ten. Mm-hmm. It's not just like, oh, they always lowball the Big Ten. They lowball everybody. That's part of their job. Right?
They don't want to just give them money for free.
Right. In other words, Notre Dame says we want $75 million per year. That way we're on par with the Big Ten schools. And NBC's not going to give them $75 million. They may get $35 to $45 million.
It's a contract negotiation.
Right. It's a negotiation. You tell everybody you want this. You're privately told this, and you somewhere in here you get this.
Dylan Brooks says he wants $25 million from most teams. No one gives it to him except for Houston, but whatever.
It's Houston. It's not. Right. So when they're lowballing him in the 2000s, I want to say 6, 7, right around there, he looks at me and says, you know what, the heck with this. I'm going to form my own network. And they laughed at him. They're like, get out of here, form your own network. For ESPN, we're the worldwide leader. We've been here since 1979. You're just going to form your own network. And by golly, he did.
Yeah.
And the first year, they lost a lot of money because they did not have Time Warner or Comcast in terms of cable access. When they finally got the Comcast and Time Warner issues resolved for year 2, the network took off. And now, of course, now you see today, there's the SEC network, the ACC network. I'm trying to think who runs those networks. Oh, ESPN does.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So then the next time through on the TV contract, this is where he made the big move. He got Fox involved. All right. Fox has been the primary and lead broadcaster since that day, 6 years ago. ESPN took a secondary package for less money, but almost double what they paid the last time. They went from $100 million to $190 or something like that per year. But Fox was the lead, and Fox has the Big Ten championship game. Okay. Well, now they've gone all the way through, and now Fox is not only the lead, but this is an NFL model. Now, how much is driven by Mark Silverman and Fox? Because Fox was at the negotiating table through all of this. And how much of this was driven by Kevin Warren? I'm not sure, but it is an NFL model where, hey, Kyle gets to watch, what's your team again?
And what, the NFL?
Yeah.
New Orleans Saints.
Saints, okay. So the Saints play at 1 o'clock on CBS. All right. And Kyle can watch the game at 1 o'clock. Oh, and then there's on Fox, it's their turn this week to have the 4:25 game. Oh, and by the way, we've got NBC with Sunday Night Football. Oh, and by the way, we've got ABC ESPN with Monday Night Football and Prime Video as Thursday night. So that's the NFL model, where they took one package, streamed it, but went over the air with everything else.
Mm-hmm.
I believe there are a couple of Sunday games in Europe, in London, that are ESPN Plus games.
Yes. All of the European games end up being ESPN due to streaming times and conflicts with schedules of networks. They usually say...
But I mean, I'm talking like exclusively.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what the Big Ten did. You got Fox at noon, CBS at 3:30, NBC at 7:30. All right. Oh, and by the way, anything that doesn't make the cut for those, we've got BTN. Okay. Streaming. Peacock has some games. It's going to be a total of 8.
Yeah.
I mean, a total of 8.
Of the entire season.
Right. The Penn State-Delaware game is one of the 8.
The big game that's going on streaming.
All right. Michigan's opener, I think, is on Peacock, and Ohio State has one. In other words, they had to talk to the, quote, big players and say, look, we need your help here. So
they each gave one.
Each gave one. Well, that's 38% of the 8. Now, basketball is going to be different. It's 37 games total, but there's exponentially more basketball.
It's a much longer season. You
talk about each team's playing 20 games. Okay, so it's 37 on Peacock, but the opening night, the Wednesday night doubleheader of the Big Ten tournament, will be on Peacock and nowhere else. BTN will have the Thursday games and the Friday quarterfinal games. Then CBS gets the semifinals and the final. But that Wednesday night will be just Peacock. So we'll see how it plays out. But so the Big Ten is dipping its toe
into streaming.
For the Pac-10, streaming is going to be more than just dipping the toe. They may have to get up to ankles or knees. All right.
I was going to say waist.
All right. Well, you have to, this is the issue for them. The issue is quite simple. If I'm a football coach, so we'll just keep this football for the time being. If I'm a football coach, I need to have people watching my games. Right? Well, if I'm going streaming, which is going to knock down the viewership.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Prime Video wanted 12 million viewers. They announced that 12 million per. They ended up with a really great number of 9.5, but that's not 12 million. Right? It's not 12 million. So if I'm a football coach at Washington State, Cal, Utah, Arizona, whatever it may be, I'm looking around saying, okay, well, who's going to watch what I'm doing here? The argument will be from George Kliavkoff, I'm sure, when they talk privately about this, is what was the viewership on the Pac-12 networks? Because a lot of these games were on the Pac-12 networks before. People don't realize the number of games. We go, hey, the Big 12, what a great TV contract. You have no idea how many streaming games there are in the Big 12 contract. Fox has game. Now, Fox isn't streaming. But Fox has games, ESPN has games, but there's going to be a lot of games on ESPN Plus in the Big 12 in football. It's not going to be 8 on Peacock like the Big 10. There's going to be between 30 and 50 football games that are going to be streamed in the Big 12. The question was going to be, now with the Pac-12, what can they come up with at this point, linear, to make this work? Because it's not just the money. The money is important for the athletic departments, but it's also the exposure. The last thing that you want to do is to have people having to fight to figure out where your game is. Right? And that's a big mistake that some people in this industry make all the time. Oh, we'll just put it here. Right? Over here in the back. The worst thing you can do is make your audience work.
When you have to Google where a game is broadcast,
Yes.
You've already lost.
Exactly. Right? It's where Major League Baseball has an interesting dynamic with the playoffs. Which game's TBS carrying? What's Fox carrying? Oh, wait, ESPN has a couple of games. MLB Network has a. Okay, you're sitting there going.
Who does Apple TV have this week? Like,
what we got here? I'm talking about that's just the playoffs. That's in the month of October. Okay, the Braves and the Phillies are on MLB Network? Really? What channel's that?
Yeah.
Okay, the worst thing in this industry that you can do, other than lay people off, the worst people is to make people work as to where to find it.
That's why it's always, you want one-stop shopping. There should be one location or a very limited number.
Right.
The less is better for a lot of people.
Now, if you're saying, well, look at the NFL on Sunday, no. Okay? It's well established what time the games are. You have an entire week to figure out what time Saints are playing the Rams. It's at 1 o'clock in New Orleans. Is that the Fox game? Okay, good. Pretty much, it's an NFC game, so most of those are on Fox. You don't have to worry about fighting to find it. The Sunday night game's been long established as to, in the off season as to who's playing it. Right? They've got it made. Even the NBA in the playoffs. It's like it's TNT. They've got certain nights. ESPN a certain night. They don't compete against each other.
Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, TNT's on. Yeah. That was the thing.
Right, exactly. And Wednesday, Friday, it's ESPN. Well, during the playoffs, same thing. They don't compete against each other in the same night. Right? Then when you get to the finals, they alternate. TNT gets one. ESPN gets the other. This year, TNT had the East. Mm-hmm. Right? The West was ESPN. Okay. It was pretty simple. And then we all know ABC has the finals. You don't have to fight to figure out where you're going. The same thing with what TNT and ESPN did with hockey. But when you're getting into a hodgepodge of and we're streaming, do you get 2 streaming services? And a linear? I mean, because the one time slot they have that has any kind of values is the 10:30 Eastern time slot, which is 7:30. And the coaches hate it.
No one wants that game.
I mean, the oddity is, I've told you before, Kyle, because of my schedule, I end up watching more Pac-10 football than anything else. And the reason is, if Penn State's on the road, the game's over, boom, you're on the plane, you fly back, okay, you get home in time. It's like, hey, what game's on? Oh, it looks pretty good. Washington State, Oregon State. I'll watch some of that. I'm seriously, or Penn State's playing at home. Take opening day West Virginia, 7:30 at night. All right, we're on the air at 6. Okay. Well, I might watch some of the first game that day, but then I have to eventually drive in. All right, and then we have to do our deal, and then we do our game, and the game's over, and who knows? I mean, probably everything's going to be over by the time I get home anyway. But, believe me, it's no sacrifice. It's zero sacrifice.
Woe is Steve.
No, there is no woe is Steve at all. No, zero. Woe is me. I'm just saying that's why I watch more Pac-10 football, because it's usually the time frame. And I get the halftime now.
Yeah. And
I go, it looks pretty good.
Well, the problem for them is also I think some people forget because, like, let's say Saturday throughout the day, there's not a lot of broadcasts that happen. Not a lot of things go on Saturdays during the day because people are always out doing things, or they're watching college football.
Yeah.
But Saturday night, you are competing with a lot more. There's a lot more shows. I mean, look at SNL. SNL is Saturday Night Live. That is a very big one.
But Saturday has traditionally been the worst viewership night of network TV for decades. This is where college football has filled the vacuum. It's made such a big difference. I mean, NBC, the heck? Okay, Saturday Night Live? Okay, guess what's leading into Saturday Night Live this year? Penn State, West Virginia on September 2nd. Well, there won't be a Saturday Night Live.
As of this moment.
Because the writers and the actors are all on strike.
It's a great time to be in media. People are getting laid off. Writers are on strike.
And the actors
are on strike.
And the actors joined them.
Yeah, they joined them last week. People left premieres. I mean, Oppenheimer's cast left it from London.
Yeah, Matt Damon and the group left. They were allowed to walk the red carpet. And then because of
the time frame,
because of the rules, they then had to leave the premiere.
Yeah.
Day of Reckoning Part 2 is not finished yet.
No.
Well, no, they're well along, but they're not finished yet.
A lot of films are partway through. A lot of films are partway through. You can't also, I know it was going on when, like, Deadpool, we're discussing movies now. Deadpool 3 was filming, and the deal is, because the writers were on strike, you could not ad-lib.
Right.
Because if you ad-lib at all, it is considered changing a script, and you cannot legally do that with the Writers Guild of America on strike. So everything they had in the script that Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman had to read, it had to be word for word. If you missed one word, it would have caused a lawsuit. So it's a great time to be in media. But that's the thing is, Saturday night 10:30 game, respectfully, not a lot of people are watching it. I usually would if I was up at 1 a.m.
Okay, I'm their audience. I mean, and again, I know because it's only because of schedule. Because I want to sit down, I want to watch college football. I love watching college football. So
you'll put it on. You'll be eating dinner at that point, or you'll be going getting ready for bed. You'll have it on in the background on the TV.
Or after working all day, you kind of put your feet up and just relax, and then and Washington State throws another interception. You're like, you start to fall asleep. So,
but Steve, that one interception, if it counted for Iowa, would get them closer to 325.
If they run it back.
If it was a pick six.
Has to be run back.
It's
the race to 325.
Hey, that's a good number to get to. It gets you there.
It's 25 points a game.
For some teams, that's tough, Steve. Iowa.
I'm talking to a Syracuse fan.
Cough. Hey, we run up the score sometime. We scored, I believe, 60 plus on our alumni weekend this past year.
Yeah, remember last year they were supposed to run it up on South Dakota State.
Hey,
Jack and I I'm talking about I'm talking about Iowa. Jack and I are looking like, That game is 3-2 in the fourth quarter. Really?
Sometimes I see these low-scoring games, and I'm like, how did that happen?
I did a 6-4 once.
Yeah.
And I tell my broadcasting class the same. I did a basketball game. I did one that was 38-33, another one that was 36-33, and a game that was tied at 33 at the end of regulation, Penn State, Tennessee. And so I was kidding Paul Keels at Ohio State. I said, Paul, look, because he was asking me about it. He said, Steve, he says, Paul, look, anybody can do 85-75. I said, it takes special skills to do 36-33. Right. Right. But I tell my class all the time, I said, once it gets to be 5 minutes to go in the game, whether it's a 6-4 football game or whether it's a 36-33 basketball game, it then becomes winning and losing. All right? It's a 3-point game. It's a 2-point game. It's here's a chance at a drive at the end where if they get a field goal, they win. I said winning and losing comes into play with 5 minutes to go. Does it matter whether it's Baylor and TCU and it's 62-59 like it was years ago? Okay? The difference is all those points were scored. Okay? The similarity is it's a 3-point game and this is a 2-point game. What? With 5 minutes to go, winning and losing comes in. Now, this may have been a little more entertaining.
Yeah, a little bit more. Well, you don't like two safeties in a game?
With 121 points on the board, maybe a little bit more.
Oh, look at that. The camera likes your hands a lot.
As opposed to 10. But at some point with 5 minutes to go, winning and losing comes into play.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I did a game with Siena in the NIT once. The final was 105-103. Okay.
Did you sit back, relax, and say, oh, look at that, this is another touchdown?
No, Joe Chrisman and I were actually talking about that game with Puff Johnson at practice one day about that game. Like, he says, I had more fun playing that game. I said, I know you did because it was like free time, let her fly.
Oh, my gosh. Gotta love a high-scoring game, but Iowa does not like them.
Okay. Highest scoring basketball game I ever did, 129-111.
Ooh.
Penn State beat VMI. It was 2006 before the Outback Bowl. And VMI is a team that played no defense. And Penn State, almost all their points were twos. Those were not like, hey, hit 43s. No. It's 129-111. You're talking about 240 points. You're talking about 6 points a minute.
Hey, that's the Mike D'Antoni way.
There were a lot There were a lot of missed shots by them and layups at the other end by Penn State.
Yeah.
And when the game was over, I looked at Dick. I said, so this is what it's like in the NBA? Time now for the magic close.
The magic close. And, of course, thanks for tuning in to Sports Talk with Steve Jones, a Seven Mountains Media production. Check back daily for all the latest news and analysis. The voice of